Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Melissa Lazaro, and I'm with Mindprint, and we welcome you to our webinar today. I'll be introducing the guest speakers and going over a few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's webinar, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, will be recorded, and you'll receive a follow-up email with the recording, as well as any links or resources that are shared today. So if you see a resource shared in the chat or in the Q&A, we'll also be putting that together for you in the email follow-up. All attendees have been muted to limit distractions, and all questions today, if you could just go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A section versus the chat, that would be really helpful. And then that way we can address questions as they come up immediately, or if we feel like it's a question that's really going to benefit the entire audience, we'll save those for the end. So today's presentation is going to be about 45 minutes long, and that's going to include time for Q&A at the end. So our guest speakers today. First, we have Nancy Weinstein, CEO and founder of Mindprint Learning. She'll be providing an overview of the science of learning and going over our agenda in just a few moments. Unfortunately, Christine Wickemeyer won't be able to join us today, but fortunately, Nancy knows Walnut Hills High School really well, and Christine had already provided some slides regarding the case study, so Nancy will go over those today. And finally, we'll hear from Wendy Weinberger, President and COO of Illuminous Academic Coaching and Tutoring based out of the DC area, who will also be sharing another case study. So welcome to today's webinar, Embrace Learner Variability, a new lens for a new year. And we're so happy that you've joined us today. Over to you, Nancy.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you all for coming. We're going to close this year on a very, very positive note and get ready for next year, because it's only getting better. I promise. You have my word for whatever I can control. Okay, so today we're going to talk about learner variability and how we define learner variability at Mindprint. And we take, I think, a little bit of a broader view than other places. And so I think that's really important. And then we're going to dig deep into the Mindprint area of expertise around cognitive variability, and then how you can actually do something about it. So we never want you to leave a Mindprint webinar or presentation without sort of actionable next steps, something that you feel that you can take with you into your classroom, school, tutoring center when you leave us. Like Melissa said, we are so lucky to have Wendy Weinberger with us. She is an amazing academic coach and tutor in the Washington, D.C. area. And also like really expertise in executive function. So I know that they're based in DC, but I also know they do a lot of online work, and she'll tell you more about that. And then we are disappointed that Christine Wickemeyer from Walnut Hills High School in Cincinnati couldn't be here with us today. She's been hit by whatever is flying around and hitting everybody, unfortunately. But she's amazing. She's done amazing work in Walnut Hills High School in Cincinnati, and we'll talk a little bit about how she does her implementation. And then if you want to take a quick, you can see our email addresses there that are available, so you can reach any of us after the webinar. With that, let's just dive in and talk about learner variability. So let's define it, put it on the table, what lens we hope you can look at students with a little bit differently, perhaps, than you have in the past. And so here you can see on the bottom, we have our Mindprint, because Mindprint, like a fingerprint, no two minds are alike. And we really need to keep that in mind. So yes, when you're looking at a kid and you can think, oh, this reminds me of a kid that I've had before. And it can remind you, but every kid is different. And you really got to think about that holistically, all the different things that can be going on. So this is the science. The science says that this is what accounts for variability in outcomes. K-12, what is driving students' outcomes in both math and reading? And yes, academic knowledge, developing the academic skills, knowing the academic content, that's a big chunk of it. There's a lot of time being spent on social emotional this year. Thank goodness. because not enough attention and time was spent in the past, but it's 25%. And then cognitive skills, and I should go back here, right? So when we talk about academic, we're talking about the quality of the curriculum, right? And we know you have a lot of focus on that, and that is so, so important. Your teacher training, your depth of knowledge, and then similarly with social and emotional. And when we talk, that is a very broad term, we know, but the relationships you have with students, a student's individual motivation, both intrinsic and extrinsic, mindset, engagement, and then of course, mental health in the world that we're living in. And those two factors combined account for 50% or so of the variability in outcomes. That said, there's this other big chunk that is driving variability in our students that we can't easily see or observe, or sometimes just pinpoint. And it accounts for about half of all the variability in the students you see. So you think about a student that maybe started in your district in second grade. You have a couple of students, they start in second grade, similar families, similar backgrounds, same teachers. They get to 12th grade, one's an A student in calculus and the other one's a C student. It's very, very often cognitive skills. And when we understand that, we can break some of those cycles, right? And so that's what we're going to dig into first and foremost today around cognitive skills and variability in those skills and how they are driving and affecting learning outcomes, but never, never, ever forgetting the importance of academic and social emotional, because we always need that full picture of a child. So we're going to do the deep dive into cognitive variability. So this is our reveal of the Mindprint learning pyramid of the different aspects that are driving a student's ability to not only understand and learn new material, but actually demonstrate proficiency and apply it for problem solving. And so we're going to break it down for you in a way which we hope really helps you to better understand the different pieces and where the breakdown might be occurring for any given student, right? So at the bottom of the pyramid is our understanding. Like fundamentally, when we introduce a new complex concept to a student, do they understand the material? Does it make sense to them? There are three fundamental ways that you can take in and understand and absorb content. And most of us have one of these three skills that's stronger than the other. Realizing that enables a student to lean into their strength and understand better. Verbal reasoning, so understanding with words, right? Exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm speaking, you're listening, you're reading my slides, that's verbal. Most of what we do in school is verbal, right? However, students also might be stronger in their ability with visual abstract reasoning, so their ability to think in terms of shapes, patterns, pictures. Visual spatial, understanding how objects relate in space. That's typically being able to work and manage with your hands and seeing how things fit together. We, in most cases, start to present students with information in a very verbal way. And about half of our students or more are much stronger on visual. And we always try to keep that in mind as we think about why our students might not succeeding. At the most fundamental level, are we presenting content in a way that is not suited to their strength? And then how do we change that? How do we use more pictures in what we're doing? Conversely, you can be in subjects like math and science, where there are more pictures and patterns, and you have students with stronger verbal reasoning. If you know that, how do you take those pictures and convert them to words and problems and examples that they understand so that they can process it? But that's a fundamental layer that you want to, of course, the first thing is it's a complex concept. We need to make sure a student understands it. That said, you can have a student that is strong across these skills and they're still not mastering, they're still struggling in school. So the next layer we want to look at is executive functions. There's a lot of talk about executive functions. Wendy is our resident expert on this call on executive functions, so we'll be talking more about that today. But basically, executive functions is, I understand it, but can I focus and organize and get my work done to be able to show you that I understand it, right? And I'm not going to do the deep dive into executive functions today because there's so much to unpack, but it is so important as adults that we understand that a student can have great, strong reasoning skills, be so capable, and then be lacking or relatively have difficulty in any of these other 3 skills. And it looks like they're not paying attention, they're not motivated, they're not trying, they're looking off into space. And that is not something that they can easily control any more than they can control whether their visual abstract reasoning is stronger than their verbal reasoning. It's just who they are, and we need to meet them where they are. And just like, because you could have a student that can understand physics and yet can't remember to bring in his homework, right? We've all seen those students that this is the reason for that. And just the same way you would scaffold to teach a student a physics problem if they didn't understand it, for some students, you need to scaffold how they can get themselves organized and hand in their work. And we're going to talk about that in this session and some later sessions. The next layer of our pyramid, right? You can understand. You can have a student that sits there in your tutoring session or in your classroom and gets all their work done in class. And then they go home, they don't even have to they don't even have homework because they finished it all in class because they're so efficient. And they come in and you talk about what we were doing the day before, and they look at you like you have 3 heads. I never heard that. You never told us that. You can have students that can be strong in understanding, strong in executive functions, and yet it is literally the proverbial goes in one ear and out the other. The great news about memory is if you discover that you have a student with weaker memory, well, it might look like they're not motivated, they're not trying, it really is weak memory. There are amazing evidence-based strategies specifically for memory. It is the most studied of any of these domains. And if you use the strategies, we know they work. It's sometimes time and effort, but it works. I'll just also emphasize that it's not just memory. We all usually have a much stronger, one memory skill that's stronger than the other. If you can lean on that stronger memory skill, you can memorize more efficiently. And then we get to the top of the pyramid, which is transfer, right? Can I take all this information that I have and understand and is in my brain and use it to solve problems and adapt and think creatively? And that's our flexible thinking at the top of our pyramid. It's actually part of the executive functions domain, but also crosses over into complex reasoning. But that's sort of like the pinnacle of success. And yes, you can have students that are strong at every other layer of the pyramid and then not strong at flexible thinking. Fortunately, we can teach and develop flexible thinking if we understand that that is where a student has a weaker skill. And so it's not that they're not listening or taking our feedback. It is literally like, just like the other skills we talked about, you can literally be strong in those skills. And then just that part of your brain doesn't allow you to easily take feedback and process it and adapt. And just like we can scaffold a physics problem, and just like we can scaffold how to get organized and help a student, we can do that with flexible thinking too, if we understand that that's the problem, right? Because if you don't know, you might be thinking you're addressing flexible thinking when really it's a student covering up because they don't understand. So you really want that objective data to understand who they are and what they need. So that's our pyramid. We'll come back if anybody has any questions. But we always get the question about if we tell a student and sort of share with a student what their strengths and needs are, then isn't that the opposite of growth mindset? And so just to sort of take that elephant in the room, I'm going to ask Melissa, I'm going to give myself a chance to get a sip of water and let Melissa actually read this quote for you.
Good. And we're right on track, Nancy, too. We've got about 5 more minutes to get to the science learning slides before we move on to the case studies. So Dr. Carol Dweck, author of Growth Mindset, said, a growth mindset is the belief that your abilities can be increased through effort, but not just effort, through good strategies and lots of support and help from others. So it's not that the growth mindset theory denies that there are differences in how quickly people master certain things. It's just that the focus is on the idea that everyone with effort and guidance can increase their abilities.
Great. And so thank you, Melissa. Beautifully said. And if you're not familiar with Carol Dweck, we do encourage you to read her work, because her work around mindset and motivation is critical to learning. Like, you can have all the skills in that pyramid, but if you're not motivated and engaged and wanting to learn, you're not going to go very far. It's all these pieces are important, but just on the growth mindset piece, the way to engage a growth mindset is not to just tell a student, you can do it. I believe in you. Yes, you need to tell them that and show them that you believe in them, but you also have to show them how to get there. And the way to get there is to have strategies, and the strategies that they need most based on where they might be struggling in the pyramid, or where they have a strength so that they can lean into it. That's a good strategy for them. So with that, we're going to talk about how you do all that, right? So how do you actually apply all this, what we just talked about, right? So you need to first understand the student and then address the problem with a process. So here's our proverbial student who might be struggling in some way, right? Again, today's focus is on this cognitive data piece, but it is the intersection of all these three pieces. They all matter, right? So you would start by first thinking, okay, what's the challenge, right? We don't want to make up a challenge, but if the student's struggling academically, we want to know. In this case, we'll say the student's struggling with multi-step algebra, right? 7th grade algebra, we know that that's a gateway skill for high school. Where is the student behaving? How are they feeling, right? Maybe the student's frustrated. They don't understand why they're getting the wrong answer. That's often the case. That's often why we can't help students, is because they can't verbalize what their challenge is. They need the adults in the room to be able to observe their behavior and also hopefully have the objective data to support them, right? In this case, maybe the mind print insight or the cognitive insight is that their spatial perception is low. If you're doing algebra and you have weak spatial perception, what that probably means is that your numbers and your formulas are all over the page. And what that means is that if your numbers are not aligned, it is really hard to do math correctly when your numbers are not aligned. And honest to goodness, for some students, it literally is as simple as using graph paper. It is that simple. You put one number in each square, make sure decimal points get their own square, draw to scale. It can change everything for a student who has otherwise good skills and weaker spatial skills, so that they can do geometry, algebra. It's everything, and so simple. And hopefully you have students where we can do a lot with these strategies that make it super simple. This is what our strategies look like. You know, it's a picture and 3 or 4 bullets. Vicky, who's also on the call with us today, is our expert in all of our strategies. So we're always here to help. But for some students, it is that simple if we can identify the root cause of the problem. So in terms of strategies, and that's really where we want you to think, is identify the problem, get to the strategies. Carol Dweck says it, Mindprint says it, get to the strategies that are going to make a difference to help that student. So if you have a Mindprint, the second page of your student's learner profile will literally give you a prioritized list of strategies for the student, depending on what the challenge is. So if this student's challenge is math, we're going to go to the math strategies down here on lesson 8. If it's memory, because they need to study for a biology test, then we're going to go up here to memory, right? You know the challenge. That's your job as the educator or the parent to know the challenge, but the strategy is there to support them. That said, we know not everybody can have a mind print, though we do think everybody should have a mind print, but our strategies are always free to you. Our student-facing strategies, you can go to strategies.mindprintlearning.com. Our strategies are all organized by the context where a student would need them. And then they're segmented by where the student might be strong or need support in that learning pyramid by those skills. And that's it. So now that's where we want to take people to. And with that, I think what's going to be really helpful is Wendy's going to start by giving you a case study and showing you both her process of how to make this sort of repeatable for all students, and then some great examples of how it's actually worked.
So Nancy, you want me to jump in here?
I would love for you to jump in.
Okay. So first, I just can't, if anyone saw me shaking my head, like it is so imperative to understand what Nancy just explained on what is the cause of the hiccup and what's going on with the student. And something as easy as graph paper, which we implement all the time with kids, it can change a whole student's world. And sometimes graph paper, even when you have kids that have dyslexia and dysgraphia that can't really write really well, that's another thing that you can jump in and use. And Mindprint has all of these different strategies for different things, but I can't tell you how much her example just resonated with so much of what we see. So thank you, Nancy, for having me and for giving me the opportunity to share how much we love Mindprint and how we use it with every one of our students. And how really easy it is, and how the insights it gives you really helps hone in a customized plan for each student. So with us, we are an academic coaching and tutoring company focusing on executive functioning support and helping kids master the executive functions that they need in order to be successful. We work with a lot of great, smart students who are very capable. Many of them have not needed to study much as they go through school, and they start to get into more complex classes. And I'm saying that even from a 3rd grade to a 6th grade to a 7th grade, all the way up to a college student. Obviously, as they matriculate through, things become more complex, and sometimes they realize, oh, well, my smarts just aren't going to get me through. I need to understand the process, and oh, I'm having some issues here and there. So I think I need some good strategies to attack those so that I can really show how valuable I am to a classroom, to a job, et cetera. So we actually require through our enrollment process that every single student take a Mindprint, because that is how we help to integrate what they need to work on specifically and what strategies will work best for their learning style based on the Mindprint results and with our customized executive functioning curriculum. So together, the two really allow our coaches to have exactly what they need to help a student most efficiently and most effectively get to where they need to be, so that they are finding success in school, whatever level school that they're in, and then hopefully taking those strategies and using them to continue with life to be successful and working in a job. So as we have all of our students come on board, excuse me, they go through our enrollment paperwork, they give us a bunch of background, but most importantly, they immediately get their initiation code to go ahead and take that Mindprint. It's really easy. Parents don't ever mind giving it. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students take it, including my own kids, because I use them as guinea pigs. And for us, we know that it is not something that kids complain about. It is not something that they're fearful of. It does not cause huge amounts of anxiety. It's 1 hour. It's simple to give. It's simple for them to take. It's a mix of games and questions. And at the end of the day, again, just want to be really clear, it's easy and no one complains about it. So it's great when kids aren't complaining. And then from there, what we do is we set up a consultation meeting that is twofold. One, for us to interview the family and the student to get to know them better for our own coach matching purposes, but two, to really review what did Mindprint tell us. And even for families who have had neuropsychological or psychoeducational testing done, this is really helpful, because it's definitely a step or 2 or 3 deeper into understanding why is there any executive function dysfunction, and where can we really step in to help, and what are the strategies that are going to be most effective. So we meet with the parents, we discuss, okay, your student took this, let's go over where their strengths and weaknesses are. Let's talk about what strategies we can, we believe will be implementing starting right away with those implementations, we'll see a difference. And then we use it as we go through our entire executive functioning curriculum. So as Nancy said, executive functioning is really imperative in order to be successful in school and in life. And so by having the Mindprint assessment to rely on for setting the stones in place to go step forward on what the best strategies are, this really helps us. And so we found that in our consultations, we have a couple things that happen, which are really nice to see and hear. One, many students understand that they're struggling, but they're really frustrated on why. And why is someone else having such an easier time in a class? They're sitting in the same classroom, they're taking notes, they're supposedly studying the same things, but yet one person gets a C and one person gets an A. And there's a lot that goes into that, but really it's important for a student to understand that they're just as capable of as everybody else in the room getting those better grades. But they just may not know that, for example, they're a visual learner and their teacher is standing up there lecturing them all day. So what they're hearing may not be exactly what they're supposed to be hearing. And when they go to study, if they're not great at taking notes or don't have the ability to take what's being told to them and put it into a visual either a visual organizer or even just getting the right notes down so they know what to study, well, they're not going to get that A. And so we love to see these students go, wow, now I understand why I'm so frustrated. Wow, I can really see how this is going to help me. And parents go, wow, Mindprint just gave me a bunch of things I can do at home to help support my student, to help support my child. And even if they're in that teenage years where they want to push back and try to grow away from parents, the parents have this ability to implement strategies and integrate it into the everyday world of the family that doesn't come across as just implementing something for a child that a teenager may push back against. So it's really been wonderful for us to see how parents and students react by seeing what this simple 1 hour assessment can really reveal and help translate into, wow, I really am capable. There's just these things that I need to work on. And there's these strategies right here that, as easy as adding graph paper is just one, that will really help me as a child succeed. And as a parent saying, wow, my kids, maybe they aren't so lazy, or maybe they aren't so disinterested, or maybe that they don't have some big underlying problem and they just aren't learning how they need to learn. And so we love the way this comes across. And we also love the fact that you can just see a relief of parents when they get this. And then from there, we use the Mindprint strategies and the tools that they give and the assessments of strengths and weaknesses, again, as I said, to integrate with our executive functioning curriculum to really customize what are strategies that are going to work for this student, because every student needs different strategies when they're having the challenges in school, not getting successful grades or feeling frustrated or feeling like they're not studying the right things. And so this is where it really helps to customize our program and bring the executive functioning tools together with the right strategies to have a child carry around so they can be just as successful as everybody else. And then from there, we really work on how do we help a child learn how to learn? How do they self-advocate for what do they need? How do they take these strategies and say, hey, I'm really a visual learner. It would really help me to go sit down with a teacher and have them maybe draw out or show me their presentation if they didn't share it with the class, which a lot of teachers don't always do. Or maybe sit down and talk with a student about being okay, I know you haven't put together a study guide, or maybe you did put together a study guide and they totally missed it, but what can I study for this? What are the topics I really need? Go in and really understand what is going to be on an assessment that's coming up, or I'm giving a presentation, and what are you really looking for? And how am I supposed to outline this? And understanding that sometimes you have to go and have that one-on-one session, or have to go and have that strategy to figure out exactly what you need to do in order to study how to learn the material, and then show someone that you've actually learned material and mastered it. And so, it's important that the parents are involved. It's important that a coach, in our case, is involved. The teachers are involved. Counselors at schools are involved. But you all start to speak the same language when you have something that translates this for you. So I've really found that the Mindprint assessment does that. It really does help be that translation tool for everybody to see that this kid is not stupid. This kid is not lazy. This kid is not disinterested in learning or bettering themselves. But in fact, they just don't know where to start. And I think it's great for everybody to get on the same page, using the Mindprint to do that. So Nancy, what did I forget in what I've talked to you about and how we use you guys all the time that I can add here?
No, you shouldn't add, but I want them to hear about some of the successes that you've had. So I did this slide for you. So you're gonna have to bear with me and look and make sure that I
Oop, you muted yourself, Nancy. You muted yourself.
Sorry.
Okay, there you go. No worries.
Not intentional.
All good.
We need some technology strategies. Okay, so this is your student, Patrick. If you want to sort of give the background on Patrick and maybe why you chose Patrick.
Sure. So Patrick is actually a college student who really seemed disengaged from his learning. felt like he really couldn't do the things that he wanted to do, and really just felt frustrated with where his level of effort was resulting in B's and C's. And so for him, he again, it's this blindness to what's really going on, and just feeling this frustration, or feeling like you're not good enough or capable of doing what everybody seems to. It always seems like everybody around you is getting A's. They're not, but it feels that way. And why can't I get the A's? And so we chose Patrick because using Mindprint to specifically help him see that there were strategies that he wasn't implementing, and where there were blind spots, that he thought the way he was doing things were effective, really weren't. And so by helping him pull in Mindprint, and then coaching him on the executive functioning side of how do you really become independent, how do you organize yourself, how do you remember what you have to do, and chunk out studying. And in college, it's really different from having that structure at home, where you really need to be able to manage your own time, manage what you're doing with that calendar. Are you taking the time to study? Are you taking the time to talk to a professor? Or are you just taking the time to sit in class and then hope it all goes in? What are all the components? And for him, he really needed to build some visual organizational tools for himself. So he needed to not only have a calendar that he was operating on, and a planner where every small
I have your strategies and your success.
Okay,
They were just on the reveal page. I wanted you to set it up, right? So did we get Patrick's strengths? I interpreted, so like strong visual reasoning, strong visual memory, and weaker attention. Classic executive function.
Yes, and that low self-esteem that comes with that, where I can't do it, I'm not good enough, I can't do this myself, I've been doing this for years, clearly I'm not good, and really realizing that maybe there was something that he just wasn't aware of, instead of there being like, I'm just not a smart kid, so let me back out and disengage, and I'm going to college and going through the motions for my parents. So yes, so Mindprint brought that aha and helped him see, as well as his parents see, that he wasn't lazy. He wasn't just disengaging because he didn't care and they were paying for college for something that they wanted and he didn't want. He wanted to be successful. He just didn't know how to go about it. So with Mindprint, that opened up our ability to see that how his brain worked and how he could leverage the strengths that he actually does have in order to overcome some of the weaknesses. Attending class is always an important thing, and also taking notes in the class and understanding what we were talking about before with, okay, I need something more visual. So maybe a strategy would be, I want to listen to what the teacher is focusing on and words that are repeated all the time, and just start by jotting those things down. I want to actually show up at class on time. So I need something that's visual on my wall that shows me exactly where I need to be and when. And on my calendar that I carry around with me, it actually shows me, what times do I need to leave for class to get there on time? What time do I need to make sure that I don't dilly-dally between classes to get to another course? When do I need to start studying? Just these strategies alone, and working on his visual memory when it came to actually learning, helped his grades go up very quickly from B's and C's to A's and B's. And I think it's a culmination of having the report from the Mindprint to show him that he is capable, and that he just needed to leverage some strengths over some to get over some of the weaknesses, and how he could be successful. And so executive functioning comes in here. We're using a daily planner, you're having a board on your wall in your dorm room, helps you see where you need to be. All of those things working together really helped him to learn, feel like he could learn and be successful, as well as being a really independent person who was an active participant on the influence of what he was doing and how his life was going to progress in school, and how he could really be successful. So it was really important to have this tool to come in and show him, because it was a data point that he could see that he was not stupid and not lazy, but that's simply some of the strategies that he was employing to learn or to show up in class, or both, were just not working for him. He needed to find other tools. And so this was really helpful from that perspective.
And I love the story of Patrick, who that is not his real name, but the fact that the strategies you use both recognize his strengths on the visual side so that he could lean into those stronger visual skills and feel good about it, still recognizing, like in the Carol Dweck way, like nobody's perfect. We all have variability. This was his weak skill in the pyramid, was his attention and probably working memory as well. And he just needed strategies to support it, because that's just who he was. And what you said, even there, I think, I don't want to gloss over because I think it's so important around even the planning, right? So as parents or folks who have strong or good executive functions, they're like, okay, it's in my calendar. That's when I need to be there. So I'm going to get there. For students with weak executive functions, when you think about scaffolding, they need to actually plan when I'm going to leave to get there. It just doesn't come naturally to them. Like, again, calculus, physics might come naturally to them, but knowing that you need to leave 15 minutes before class to get there, and if it's snowing, maybe it's 20 minutes, they need someone to tell them that, and then they learn and grow from that. So I do have reasonable executive function, so I am watching the time, and I know that we want to leave time for Q&A. So I want to ask Melissa whether or not you want me to jump right to Q&A or quickly go through Christine's case study at Walnut Hills.
I think it might be helpful for our audience to hear how a school would use, just the success story of how a school is kind of doing this process. I don't know if we have to go directly into the student profile, but at least go through the process, I think would be helpful. Yeah. And
Great. So I'll try and sort of race through it a little bit. At Walnut Hills, it's a test in school, often rated the #1 high school in Ohio. We've been working with them for probably 5 or 6 years now. They do it, they have a student success center that has been incredibly successful. It's living up to its name. So it says student support center, it should say student success center, where they literally went from 10 to 15% of students were literally failing out of this public high school a year to under 5%, all based on Christine and a couple of colleagues using this process. It's incredible. She's incredible. I wish she could be here. But so it selects students that come into the Student Success Center. It's either because everybody's qualified, otherwise they wouldn't be in the school, but they're either, once they start to fail a class, like that first year, that transition year is a killer, particularly for kids with weaker executive functions, or if they're coming from a less rigorous elementary or middle school going into a more rigorous high school than maybe their peers who came from some of the more rigorous schools in the district. So students are sort of identified. It's about 20% of the students in the school to participate in the student support center. So they do, just like Wendy, they're doing intake. In their case, they're using grades, particularly if a student's failing a class, their state testing, their entrance exam, because they had to take an entrance exam to come in, the mind print assessment, and then they are never forgetting that social and emotional piece. So they are getting parent, student, and teacher feedback. They have a form. Based on that, they come up with a plan. So yes, they use the mind print data for the strategies, but they are taking into consideration, right? So if students only failing one class and that's why they're there, that's the class that they're focused on. But now that they have strategies to match up with the student's profile so that they can communicate to both, to not just both, all. So literally they view their constituents as the student, making the student self-aware, strengths, needs, how am I going to get better? The teachers, Christine communicates out to the teachers to make sure that the teachers are aware that the student is working hard and how that teacher might be able to support that student in the classroom, and then parents to support with homework. So they come up with a plan, they work with their students. Typically the students are only with them, they have success with, I think it's like 3 to 6 months on average, and then the students are sort of not failing anymore and know what to do. They teach the strategies individually when they can. They also do small groups to sort of take advantage of peer teaching and making kids, when their kids aren't doing well in school, they kind of feel alone. This way, if you have groups of students together, they feel a little bit less alone. And then I know 5 years ago when Christine would go, because it's such a top performing school, there was like this somewhat of a sentiment, which if they are smart enough to be here, they are smart enough to figure out how to get their homework done and get A's, right? And she sort of brought them around to helping understand that students can be really strong in that pink layer of the pyramid, like those really strong reasoning skills, which is what got them a great score on the entrance exam, and can be struggling with memory or executive functions, or even one of those reasoning skills. And so she's gotten so much more buy-in in the last couple of years in terms of teachers actually embedding the strategies, not just for the students that are in the student support center or student success center, but for all students in their classrooms. So she wanted to share this one case study, so I'll share it with you. She had a student totally frustrated because she was getting B's and C's in math, totally trying, totally frustrated, was studying with flashcards, sort of doing everything you're supposed to be doing. She gave her the mind print. The student was, in fact, gifted. That's what star next to abstract reasoning, top 5% of the population. Strong verbal reasoning, like you couldn't have better set of skills to be able to succeed in school, except for the fact that she had weak visual memory and she was in math class. And visual memory is how you would sort of naturally remember formulas, constants, like, you know, a 3, 4, 5 triangle and what it looks like and how to do all those steps. And so that's where they sort of dove in, because this is a student that even though she would understand it, wouldn't remember it. And she was using flashcards like with, you know, like was just using like, oh, this is the shape they gave us. This is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. And so, and then not having the words to go with it. So basically what they did was they started talking through formulas and content, making sure every picture was tied with words. And then putting in a little bit more repetition, because if you do have a weak memory skill, you do need to study more regularly. You can't save it till the night before the exam. If you have great memory, you kind of can, but most of us can't. There was an immediate improvement in math grades. And then just as Wendy was saying, improve self-awareness and self-confidence to know that something was hard. And then you could do something that's relatively simple and make it so much easier. That's a life lesson and a life skill. Like if I can just find this way to make this easier, oh my God, everything can change. And we can all learn from that lesson. And so it sounds like Wendy had that experience with her student. Interestingly enough, flipped with strong visual memory, right? So she had to use more visuals to help that student, more colors, more you know, visual calendar, whereas this student needed to use more words. And it's just, we're all different, but they both got there, and sounds like relatively quickly. So with that, I know we're at 1:45. Can we answer any questions that are in the Q&A or the chat, Melissa?
Yeah, we've got about 4 or 5 questions here. So I'm gonna do in order that they were asked. So Sumner McCallie asked, have you seen trends over the last 3 to 5 years as to what kinds of challenges are most common in students? Is there data on if these are different for boys and girls or by age? And has that shifted or stayed mainly the same?
Oh boy, we could do a whole webinar on that, Sumner, but thank you for, it's a great question. So the short answer is what we see in our data, which is not published data. Like we're not publishing trends data, like NWEA published lots of data on lower reading scores, 3rd grade specifically, right? What we are seeing in our data, which would support what people are saying, is weaker verbal memory post-pandemic. We believe it's kind of, we didn't ask students to really memorize as much during the pandemic. A lot of classes were open book, open note. And I think students didn't sort of naturally develop the retention skills. And because memory is very metacognitive, like you have to think about how you're memorizing it, and it's a process. And I think students just didn't naturally develop those skills during the pandemic with verbal memory, which is more school-based, is verbal is usually. And so we're definitely seeing that trend. Wendy's nodding, so it sounds like she's noticing it as well. Certainly executive functions across the board, when folks are complaining about kids running in the halls and not even knowing what they're supposed to be doing and not acting their age. So I think some of that is just learned behavior, but cognitively we are seeing weaker executive functions, but I think that has as much to do, executive functions can really be affected by stress, trauma, mental health. We know that mental health concerns are up across the board for students. And so we would expect that to manifest in weaker executive functions. The good news is if that is the case, once you remove some of the chronic stress and students' mental health starts to improve, you'd also expect their executive functions to start to improve. And then I think there was another part of the question about gender specific. We do have some gender specific trends in our data. We'll talk about that at another session. But coming out of the pandemic, no specific trends, girls versus boys, in terms of, what's changed in our students.
And what has been your experience with parents? And this might be more geared towards Wendy, but I could see possibly how a school might raise this question as well, is what has been your experience with parents who say this feels very formal, or I didn't sign a consent? My guess is with schools, it's part of their battery of assessments that they do all the time. And so it falls into that category. And maybe Wendy, whoever wants to tackle that question.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in real quick. When we talk to our parents, it's just part of the process of figuring out where we're starting with a student. And so we really haven't had that problem, because we want to know where we're starting, and we want to know the best strategies and the most efficient and effective way to help the children, right? The people that we're working with. And so parents, for the most part, really love this. Prior to making it required for all of our students, we used to have it optional, and we had probably a 90% plus take rate on it. It's just really a great tool. And when you explain where it comes from, and the fact that, this is something that was a result of a grant from NIH, where University of Pennsylvania Medical Center and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP, work together to create this, and that it comes out of something that NASA actually uses to figure out, what are how do the cognitive functions of astronauts, how do we best teach them, how do they best learn, like all of those. Parents lean in and say, no, this is great. And by the way, we're sharing it with the parents too. It's not one of those tests, even for schools. I can't speak to if schools share it, but I will say for us, the ability to share it with a parent who then chooses to share it or not with a child, parents really like to have that insight. Not everybody walks around and spends money on a neuropsych or a psychoeducational test, to figure out how their child's brain works. This is a really simple way that's incredibly thorough and has the data and the background and the right people who created it, and really the way it's presented, and all the support that Nancy and Vicki and Neil on their team all give, that this is such an easy tool for parents to lean into. It doesn't become a consent issue in any way, but rather, wow, this is like insights into how my child's brain works that will really help me and help them. So we have not had that issue at all. And it's also how it's presented, by the way. It's not like you're taking some formal test. This is really easy. It's parent proctored. It's 1 hour. It's not going to be any big impact on your child to take time out of their already hard week with lots of things going on. So I think it's all in how it's presented.
Can I just piggyback on that question too? There was a question about how do you handle it with students who are coming to you with a diagnosis already, whether it's of a learning difference or autism spectrum? Yeah,
sure. And we have many students that are that way. And again, I've explained to parents, yes, and tell me what that neuropsych or psychoed, or I'll read it myself. What does it say? It says your child has an executive functioning dysfunction. They struggle with organization, time management, and blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't give the information that this assessment gives. This breaks down all of the different functions and tells us exactly where the strengths and weaknesses are, and gives us strategies that will work for that student that is not in a neuropsych or a psychoeducational report in any way. So I have no problem with parents asking me about that, and they understand why this is necessary. And I've never had a parent say to me, well, we have that, so we don't want to do this. Mm-hmm. And they've all found it to be helpful and insightful, including me. By the way, I'll just tell you that I have a child that has a diagnosis and, was thinking, oh, I've done, these tests and have all these reports. And he took it. He was also my guinea pig, by the way, and he didn't complain about it at all. He had fun with the games and whatnot. And it gave me a whole nother layer of depth into understanding what he needed, what strategies would work for him. And he too has a coach, because I'm a parent and we know nothing, of course. So, I think it's a great additional tool for not that much cost to get these deeper insights past getting your neuropsychoeducational report with a diagnosis.
Yeah, thank you. So
Sure.
we're coming up on about 10 minutes over time, but we've still got quite a few people with us because I know they're really enjoying these questions and answers and hearing your input, Wendy and Nancy. Nancy, did you want to say anything else about that question? We just have 2 short questions after that.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think it's really to Wendy's point about positioning, like we're not making a diagnosis. We're not, this is a formative assessment, right? It's how do I learn? It's for the student. How do I learn and what do I need to be successful? For those who haven't seen our reports, sometimes the first time someone sees a MindPrint report, they're like, where are all the numbers? Because there basically are no numbers on the report, because the idea is really what the goal is to communicate, like, what are my strengths and how do I lean into them, right? And that's why we always go back to the Carol Dweck work and the strategies. The reason for knowing your strengths is not to say, hey, I'm great, right? The reason for knowing your strengths is like, wow, how is this going to help me be successful in life? How do I lean into using my strength when learning is hard? But then even more importantly, like nurturing that strength, because that's probably where I'm going to find my success in life. And there's tons of research around how those 3 skills at the bottom of the pyramid, the pink ones, the verbal, spatial, and abstract, highly, highly correlate to college major and to career success. And so if you know that your strength is in spatial perception, and first of all, you probably don't know if you're in school, because schools don't spend a whole lot of time on that. And then if you discover, through MindPrint that you are, all of a sudden it opens up a world of art, design, STEM careers that you might not have otherwise thought about, or someone might not have thought to introduce you to, because that is your area of strength. And I think that it is, of course, parents are going to ask questions at times about it, and they should, right? There's plenty of research to validate what we're doing, but they should ask questions about their child. They can't, and there's nothing more precious, right? So they're going to ask questions, but I think if they understand this is truly a formative assessment to understand where the child is at this point in time, so that they can be their best self. And I think that, we always get that question from schools, and then we always sort of, I don't want to say always, but we typically end up in the place where, where schools decide to inform parents that they don't feel that they need parent consent, because it is a formative assessment, and just like any other formative assessment, you really don't need consent.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to add one other thing to what Nancy said, with respect to there's not numbers on the report. This is a usable report. This is not something that's difficult to understand. The first time you see it, you may have questions. I mean, everyone does. It's a whole new thing, right? Just like learning any new tool that you're going to use, you have to learn it. But this is not about telling kids there's a percentage of this, or that, their aptitude is X. This is about really consumable information, that is going to be a tool, a usable tool as you find it, as you read it, for both parents and teachers and coaches and tutors. This is not something that you're going to have to struggle through and have to translate to understand. It's a take it and run with it. There's not a big learning curve here, and it's really really executable, which I find invaluable, because sometimes just getting data and stats, then you have to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? And a kid can't really comprehend that. I mean, think about this as how a coach would coach an athlete. They wouldn't give them stats. They would figure out what the skills are that they need to build and how to build those skills and ways to execute. And that's what this tool is. And I think that that's a really important thing to understand.
Mm-hmm. Really quickly on the numbers, we did have a question of, like, Nancy had made a comment that the student was gifted because it had a star next to one of the skills. And so I just clarified in the chat that what that means is top 5%. But she said, I'm hesitant to open up that can of worms when I'm sitting with a parent. So how do you buffer that, or can you give a further explanation or detail? Because we're saying there's no numbers, but then it actually is driven by numbers, right? So If you could.
That is a completely fair question. Kudos to the person that pinpointed that. So we are trying to find balance, because we do need to find the balance. So on the report for students, there are no numbers. There's no star, there's no top 5% or anything else. That is, in many cases, at least in schools, typically the report that the parent sees as well, because it basically gives a relative strength, relative need, relative to oneself, and then the actionable strategies, which really is the goal. That said, you know, there are folks like Wendy, there are folks that are working in, you know, student support offices where they need to make decisions about, you know, does a student need more enrichment, right? Is the student struggling in a way where, you know, if you are on the tails in a certain skill, like we all know that there is ADHD medication, right? We all know we're all probably on a spectrum of attention, particularly during the pandemic, and we have stronger or weaker attention. For some students, that attention is that low that medication really could be helpful. And so we need to give the buckets where we're not making any diagnosis or suggesting anything, but giving you the buckets to say this student is in a range where you might want to go and talk to someone and see if the student needs a diagnosis and they do need a little bit more, right? I mean, that is, you know, that's reality in life. And Carol Dweck says it as well. Like, that's not about not having growth mindset. That's about knowing the starting point so we know what's a fair scaffold and how to expect and manage growth. And so, yes, we sort of say our report is, so it's got to be based on the numbers, because if not, we couldn't give you a relative score. We couldn't sort of let you know, like, when a student really does need more help, beyond what, you know, beyond what they should be getting in a general education classroom. But it's a it's quantitative data, but presented in probably the most qualitative way we can, but making sure you have the information you need so that if you do need to seek more help and, you know, expert advice, that you know to get that advice.
Mm-hmm. So we're at the top of the hour now. But we did have a comment in the Q&A. It was just someone from Walnut Hills that did join us. And so if it's helpful for any of the school listeners that are still on here, she wanted to point out that they do have a school-wide Schoology page and post-learning strategies to every single student in the school, not just those that are in the program. So this is something that they offer to all students. So she just, you know, wanted to point that out. There was one quick question though. Is there any suggestions for like TK to first grade, like your little students? Any suggestions of what assessment to give them, or is there nothing out there yet? Or
so I think that we don't have norms for that age, and the reason we don't is because developmentally it might not be the right answer to give an online self-administered, self-paced assessment to a 6 or 7 year old. Right. If someone does have concerns about a child, like, there are wonderful people in the school building that you can ask. Sometimes it just starts with an observation. And I will say that the strategies that we recommend at on that strategies page, which are free and available to everyone, that they can be scaffolded down for younger children, right? So most of them are, you know, it's a continuum of how you present information. So most of the strategies actually can be used with younger students. So and our expectations, we do need to give kids a chance to grow too, right? Like, I mean, there is developmentally, there's a whole lot that goes on in the brain in those 0 to 8 years. And we do want to make sure that we're giving students the time to develop. But we're happy if person wants to email us directly, we can make sure that they're pointed to the right resources. And then I would, I'd like to say to my friends at Walnut Hills, who I absolutely love and have been such a strong supporter of Mindprint, that if I misspoke about anything, I would be the first to admit that I could not do justice to what Christine would have said. I just tried to fill in her absence today, and please, like, they've just been wonderful partners, and Christine's had such great success there, and the whole school is wonderful. So apologies if anything I said was incorrect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Nancy, I'll go ahead and let you wrap it up, but we just appreciate everybody that stayed on. We've had more than half stay all the way to the full hour, even though we were going to go 45 minutes. So we just appreciate you being here, and just the great feedback that we've already gotten in the chat. So Nancy, if you want to say anything else.
Just, thank you for supporting us, and please let us know how we can support you. I think that when we all learn to sort of embrace the variability and not expect exactly the same things from every student, but meet them where they are in different ways, we're gonna have a lot happier kids and a lot more successful. So thank you for letting us be part of your journey. And we hope we'll see you at the next webinar. I don't know if you had a chance to put it in the chat, Melissa, or not, but we're looking forward to Mary presenting with us next month.
Yeah, so it's in the chat, it was in there earlier, and I just posted it again. So, and I'll be including that in the recording follow-up email that goes out after today. So we'll have another opportunity to join us.
Oh my God, and I would be remiss to not say thank you, Wendy. I wish I could give you a virtual hug for being so amazing, and such a ideal user of Mindprint. We can't be happier, so thank you.
Thank you for having me. I hope that I was able to help. And if anyone also needs help on the younger ages, and it's an executive functioning issue, we usually can help in that too and point them in the right direction. So just give a shout.
Oh, and Wendy, you mentioned this yesterday, so I just want to point it out. You're hiring, right? So give you a plug.
Sorry. Yeah, we're looking for awesome teachers who have passion with helping kids. So if you have any interest in doing that, we got cut off.
Sorry. You're good. It was just me. Sorry, keep going, Wendy.
Keep going, Wendy.
Oh, okay. No, so if you're interested in coaching with us or working with us on helping kids master executive functioning skills with the help of the Mindprint assessment to guide you, please let us know. We're on Indeed, posted under Illumino's academic coaching and tutoring, and Nancy and Melissa know how to reach us as well. So we're always looking for fantastic folks as we grow, and we do have about 50% of our population that's virtual. So it's unrestricted boundaries on where you live, and if you live in DC, even more so, give us a call or let us know, and we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Wendy. We appreciate your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah,
thank you. Have a great